My breath harnesses the universe. My inaction of just completely autonomous release harnesses anything, any place, person, or thing at will. You think it. Healing is instant. Manifestation is instant. Magic is instant. That is what we call that primordial pulse.
Okay. I wanted to know your view about whether we are as a collective going into the higher vibration or not. So
Right.
you mentioned about Schumann resonance. So you do believe that now these psychic abilities are coming online for all the people which was not there 30 years ago, like you mentioned, and we are as a collective getting into higher vibration. You talked a lot about embodying that in this vehicle here and now. And you mentioned about my son, and my son tells me even in my body, and he is listening right now to the conversation, and I can feel him. So when we have this embodiment of the source of that energy within this body, and we use this as a vehicle for a service, and that is when we start actually having more realization and remembrance. But at the same time, you talked about immortality a lot for this body. So, for this physical vessel, when you talked about immortality and you talked about diminished returns a lot, because healers and channelers, and they kind of tend to expedite aging, is what I understand.
Well, they expedite the one facet of the diamond.
Yeah.
So when someone obsesses on love, love is one facet. Love is not the answer.
Yes.
Yet most people go, "Oh, love is the answer." No, it is not.
Okay, we'll come to that. My first question is immortality. When you talk about immortality and about the physical body, how do Taoist practices impact the DNA of a person, and how are people able to live for 300, 500,000 years? So can you just talk about that?
Yeah, right. So let's look at the fundamentals. So you're looking at your flesh, your mitochondria, the activation of what we call ATP, which is the spark of divinity that resides within all action and inaction within the physical body, right? So you are starting with this energy source. It diminishes, goes from creatine, phosphate, into glucose, into glycogen, which is what's stored into the muscle tissue. And you can convert these energy sources from ketones to just glycogen, depending upon the pathway of what you nourish the body with, whether it's plants, whether it's flesh, protein, or other elements that are stacking up a physical result. Now, within epigenetics, an understanding of that, which is a more scientific-based realization, it's very much the same. You are a product of your environment. So the messaging of your environment enters the self-receptors on the dermal layer of your skin. This is still the entering of the body through the alchemical process of pineal, thalamus, and pituitary gland. These are the three treasures that we create alchemical processes. We use the blood, the culture medium, to shuttle those into accessing everything right down to a gene expression that can be altered by the mind. So to nourish that, it starts with understanding there is no separation, and you need to start to now cultivate evidence of such. So simplistic fortifying of the flesh, most martial artists or teachers that get obsessed with yang energy have a diminished return. They become really profound healers, and they get involved in martial arts and things of physicality, and their end result of their end of life is normally within the 50s and 60s, because that's the timeline of them illuminating and basically becoming obsessed with this one element, this one energy potential, and it emits through the body, and the body is the diminished return. Now, if they're able to find a teacher that can show them the qualities of the yin and the qualities of the yang, and then you return those to the primordial magnetism of a pulse, you start to see this. So when I do things like put a skewer from my arm, pull it out, and there's no entry or exit point, these are abilities of chi packing, right? This is what we call chi packing, where we saturate the physical body. It goes down to a subatomic level where you are now supercharging the mitochondria within the body and giving yourself a level of development that precedes anything in the physical state. So we can access, the easiest way to access anyone is to have an emotion or have a physical reaction, and I enter into their body at a very, very quick rate with little to no effort, effortless. And so you puppeteer them through the fascia. And so we consume and concentrate that is what we call fajin. And so let's say, for example, it's not just like a distant healing. Let's say I have someone in the room that puts their hands on me. The more they assert force, the more I own them. I control them, because I am just sliding into that pulse of magnetism, into their resistance, which will come in their mind, in their mental, emotional state, and ultimately transmute through their body. The harder they attempt to control me, the less control they have. First, I would seep into the fascia, then remove their connection with the earth, and then have way with them in relation to their organs, find their most efficient organ, one that's in excessive. Most people have spleen or liver that's excess, and then I just funnel and transmute the energy into that, and they have a mental emotional effect that will reside in a physical submission. And so these are all parts of a martial way of thinking, right? That's not how we heal. This is part of understanding that people bring this stuff in. The less you know, the more you know. The more you need to control. If you grab a sand in the palm of your hand and you just hold it there, it glistens, it's beautiful, it's soft, it's silky. The second you attempt to grab it, it seeps out of your hand and it ultimately disappears. This is the same with everything within this material state. You need to understand that when you go into what people refer to as the stillness, it's a knowing, it's a wholeness. It's not a stillness in never moving again. It's realizing that you're now tapping into that pulse, and that will ultimately affect every thought, every feeling, every action that you have will have the same permanency that would not be possible without that cultivation. So you are saturating. So the more you chi pack, the more you cultivate the energy, the longer your life force is, and it will continue. Back in those days when I was training in China, there was immortal teachers that were in their 90s, 100, and they would be like, at the front of the class teaching. And for example, one specific time, this one teacher fell off the podium. And he was going, and you're thinking this guy's like 98 years old, thinking, oh my goodness, he's going to break a hip, he's going to do whatever. One of the students jumped out and cradled his fall. The teacher got up and said, thank you, Dao, and walked away. Because when you know, no matter what, there's a certainty that would not be certain, that would not be something you can grasp, that embodiment requires nothing from the person. And when you hold that resonance, it will show itself in every aspect of your reality. And it will exhibit what would be called a charmed life. Anything you want, need, or desire will be provided for you because you're in service. to help and heal others at the highest level, accept and love all. And love is not an all-consuming hallmark throwaway. People tend to diminish it with that. Love is an oscillating facet of that diamond of perfection. It's whole. It's a concentration. So when you dip in between the breath in and the breath out, is a concentration, what we call absorbing of the riches, which shows evidence through the flesh, and we cultivate that as a hardened diamond that cannot be faulted, cannot be destructed. It is permanent, and that starts to bleed into everything and expand and oscillate. This shows you evidence, and diamond is also one of the elements that we use to cultivate the upper dantian, activating the light and nourishing and oscillating and emitting that. And so the middle dantian uses a red ruby, and the lower dantian uses a blue emerald. And so these gems are nourished with the keepers of those dantians to activate this present moment.